Virginia, I'd like to start with you. Obviously, at XNatura, you work at the intersection of tech and sustainability. You're obviously dealing with a lot of emerging technologies. So, in your opinion, what are technologies like AI, remote sensing, IoT, and others? How are they helping companies monitor data better?
Thank you so much. First thing I want to say, I'm so happy that we are here talking about biodiversity because we hear a lot of, climate and carbon. Of course, it's very important to talk about climate, but nature, it's a very emerging issue. It's a crisis, one of the main crises we have, and actually, it's a help. It's a huge help we have due to, in order to become more resilient to climate change and to the consequences of climate change. So it's very important to talk about nature. That's just to start. About monitoring, of course, when we come to nature, the first thing, but I think this is common for every single problem. The first thing you need to do is measuring, and for companies, it's very important to measure because actually they don't impact only on nature, but they depend a lot on nature. So the measuring is the first thing you need to do in order to understand the problem, basically. So what are we doing is like creating a new way to monitor biodiversity, because as you know, biodiversity is a very complex theme. It's a very complex issue. You should take into consideration a lot of factors. And up to now, we were monitoring nature with very traditional methods that were very expensive. They were very not that much scalable because they needed like human resources, So for example, if you needed to monitor insects, you needed to do with transect, and that's very expensive. So we are completely changing that thanks to technology, and for that, technology is our friend. In our case, with XNatura, we do it. We're mixing, different technologies such as remote sensing, such as sensor on the field based on bioacoustic in order to monitor pollinators, but also birds, camera trap for mammals. And we also monitor biodiversity thanks to lab analysis, so ADNA. So all these technologies together give you a broad view on how is nature, what's the status of biodiversity, and which are the decisions you should take in order to improve nature.
Yeah, so it's reducing the burden on labor and allowing us to get more accurate data. That's very interesting. Talis, can I come to you? Your work focuses on genetic diversity as a core pillar of resilience, of biodiversity resilience. Could you share a little bit more about how tech is helping with that, and also why are we talking about this?
Yeah, well, with so many species going extinct literally on an hourly basis, we have to do something about it. And tech is out there and using that tech in a way. And with what we're doing with Nature Safe, we have the ability now to freeze down these species. And that's what we've done in a way that we can bring them back in the future. And we have to use all this tech in a way. I mean, we've got the ability now to freeze down a skin sample and turn that into a sperm and an egg. We have the ability now to really be able to biobank these species before they go extinct. So tech's great. There's something called the extinction vortex, where these species get into this vortex, and when they get to the bottom, it's very hard to climb back out. So we have to use tech and technology to make sure that doesn't happen. So it's called inbreeding. Inbreeding of species, what makes them go extinct. It's not just the lack of numbers. So we need tech in a way of preserving and freezing these species down, looking at their genetics. And when we're doing this, we freeze 50 different genetic lines. And to me, it's absolutely essential, some of this work. I mean, if this could be the last backstop, we're like the underwriters of the animal kingdom, so to speak. And Nature Safe, well, I know I'm very passionate about it, but I really believe it could be, very sadly, the last resort. hear about the Millennium Seed Bank. I presume everybody knows about the Kew Gardens and the Svartsvot Seed Bank with all our trees and everything around us. But where's the one for animals? So, yeah, we really believe we've got a solution. It runs alongside normal conservation efforts, but we're using science and technology. We have a whole list of professors. Just recently, we froze coral for the first time in Europe, and then I feel like a father again. I've got these cryo coral babies literally just down the road at the Hornemy Museum. So science and tech can make such a difference to the biodiversity loss. But it's a race against time, and sometimes we can't wait for the technology to catch up, because if we don't biobank these materials now, we have nothing for the future. And I think we have to look at ourselves. We hopefully will be all right, but that's our children's children. They'll look at us and they said, you had the ability to do this, but you did nothing. So I think it's so important that we have the science out there and we have to use it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting solution. Some would argue it's very out there, but I think, as you say, it's time for urgent action. So that's thanks for that. Virginia, you have a different approach to a solution. There's a 5-step approach that's applied to different sectors. We were talking about this in agriculture, energy, others, and we were talking about genetics. Can we talk a little bit about this 5-step approach as well?
Yeah, sure. Our 5-step approach is actually useful for all sectors.
Okay.
It can be used by all sectors. The first thing you need to do, as I said before, is measuring. Without data, we cannot do anything at all. Of course, how to measure all the technology I mentioned before. So it's a mix of technologies: remote sensing, sensor on the ground, eDNA. So once you have actually the data, then you can prioritize, and we can prioritize in a company approach, but also in a site-specific approach. The third step is for sure setting targets. And on this, I want to say something. Sometimes some clients come to us saying, okay, I want to be biodiversity positive by 2030, and I've already did a statement on that. And I say, okay, good luck with that, because that's difficult. That's really difficult. So it's very important to set targets as a third step once you have already measured and once you have already prioritized things you can actually do. Because you need a budget on that, so you need time also. So setting target is the third step, and then for sure the first step is taking actions. And I said before, we can take action as a company with a company approach. So having, for example, a biodiversity strategy, and XNatura, it's helping due to the platform, thanks to the platform giving you the biodiversity strategy, but also at a site-specific level. So thanks to the platform, we can generate an automatic biodiversity action plan. And finally, of course, the 5th step is disclose and track. Disclosing is so simple. Once you have all the data you need in a single platform, actually, the only thing you need to do is download the data in the format you need. So it can be ESRS, it can be TNFD framework, SBTN, whatever. You could just download it and add it, for example, on your report, or use it for communication.
That's great. Thank you, Virginia. Very tangible 5 steps. Talis, I want to come to you because I think that Virginia laid out a solution, made it sound simple. It's very clear, targets, monitor it. But from your perspective, why is it difficult? Like, what are the challenges in biodiversity monitoring and conservation today? And why aren't we being able to do it? And how can tech help?
Quite often, I think a lot of companies are obviously going down the carbon route. We've got to think outside the box, and I think that's very much what we are doing. And there's so much technology out there. Sometimes it's trying to find out how that can fit into the conservation world, but it can play such a huge part in it, and and the ability to do that. And Sir David Attenborough, in his last program, his last quote, he said, it was called The Mating Game. He said, "If we so wish, we have the ability to save any animal, or at least its tissue, until we know how. So in other words, we have to bank now to wait for sometimes the technology to catch up, as I was saying. So I think, yeah, I love the tech side of it, and that's what I love the tech, and I love saving species, and how we can bring the two together is a big tick in our boxes. And a lot of it's out there, some of it's under development. We have some huge challenges sometimes when we're faced with, we had something called the other day called the mountain chicken frog. I don't know if anybody's heard of this. There's only 100 left in the world. And suddenly you're faced with this animal in front of you that you've got to try and save. And you're looking for tech and science and technologies to help you do that. And sometimes it lets you down. But I can tell you now, it's the biggest win in the world when you've actually cryopreserved it and you know you can, in theory, bring that species back in the future from this technology. So yeah, it's a sad world, but it's an ever-changing world in the sense that there is a bit of hope. And if we can grasp it, but we've got to do it here and now. You know, the earliest species, I say, every half an hour goes extinct, so we can't wait.
Yeah. And very interesting, I think you're right. We have to act now. I'm going to also just feel free to raise your hand, ask questions, and as we go through it, I have a couple more. But if you have any burning questions, we do want to take questions from the audience as well. Virginia, I want to come back to you. And we talked about businesses that find it difficult to monitor. We know that 50% of GDP depends on nature. What is the business case for companies that are not doing it right now? Why should they proactively invest in this?
That's a really good question. If you were asking this question to me like a month ago, I would say dependencies, of course, because businesses depend on nature, but I would also say reporting. I think that reporting is not an issue anymore with Omnibus, especially. I mean, it is. Of course, there are some companies that still are under the CSRD, but a lot less than before, and I don't think that was the reason to actually do something about nature and start monitoring it. It's especially dependencies, because we depend a lot, businesses depend a lot on nature, and you need to, assess the risk of not having nature anymore. A lot of companies, for example, in the infrastructure sector, use our platform to do the risk assessment of all their assets, of all their portfolio, and this is very important. A lot of agricultural food and beverage companies, and also involved in the agricultural sector, they use it to prove that they are using, for example, regenerative agriculture, or to understand where their supply chain, which is so critical, it's going. So I'm thinking about, for example, coffee supply chain, cocoa supply chain. They are very critical, and due to climate change, things are going to change a lot in the next few years. So they need to understand which field they can keep, which providers they can keep, which one they need to, just leave because there's not going to be a crop anymore in 5 years, 10 years, and where to invest new. And for example, if I take the real estate sector, it's a very important, for example, for the biodiversity net gain. So you can use the platform and data in order to get an idea of which is the best design for a project in terms of nature, comparing layers, and finally decide which is the best layer you can get. And there are different reasons for different sectors, but since biodiversity is material, because a lot of business depend on nature, a lot of sectors have actually the need to start monitoring it.
Yeah, that's a good call to action. Talis, last question for you, and I know we have a question in the audience as well. It's very interesting what you're doing, but I have a question around, is it very niche? Are you being able to work with different stakeholders across different industries in order to sort of get innovation up to scale, or how are we working with partners?
Yes, so we're setting up these biobanks all over the world, and it's about obviously training, knowledge transfer, and that side of things. So yes, we set one up in Japan, India, Iceland. We're doing one in Kenya, and with endangered species, you can't move them across borders for the CITES agreement. So you have to do it in situ. So the skills are fairly easily trainable. But it's so that's, to set up a hub, it's between 50 and 100,000 pounds, and to buy back one animal is about 350 pounds. So to save one species is about 17,000 basically.
Wow.
So, but yeah, so the tech, is transferable. The other thing I was going to say, building onto your side, we're a never-changing world we're seeing, and some of these species have to adapt to this world we live in. And some of the technologies like CRISPR technology or gene editing, out there, sometimes this can be a bit scary to some people. And I remember, when Dolly the sheep was born in '96, that was a line we shouldn't cross and things like that. But now we are at a cliff edge. We have to look at this science. We have to try and use it in a positive way. And it is out there. And it is, quite exciting, some of this technology and how it can be used in the potentially saving some of these species from going extinct. So there's plenty of hubs. That's what we're doing, and we've got to remember what we're doing is living biobanking. There's lots of biobanks out there, but we're totally different. So basically what we're doing, if you got this glass of water and put it into your freezer, and it was like a skin cell, that would just when it froze, it would shatter and break. What we do is literally take the lid off it and add an antifreeze, and that cell stays alive for 10, 20, 30 or 1,000 years time. And that's the sort of technology that needs to be developed in a way that we can preserve these species before it's too late. So yes, there's it's about knowledge transfer and that side of it, and it's about working together. That's the big thing.
On that note, I did see a question there from this gentleman. Yes, if we could get that question and then another one. Go for it.
Hi, Simon Dawes from Protect Our Winters. It's a question for Tullis, I think. It's super interesting, and thank you for what you're doing, because it sounds amazing. I guess the question that was going, perhaps a build on your point, Pratima. It's great that you're developing the ability to bring these species and animals back, but they're going to need habitats to come back to and live in. So are you doing any work around partnering to preserve habitats, freeze habitats, if you like?
No, we've been asked that question a few times, and we're a new charity. We're doing our bit, and hopefully there's other people out there. I quite agree. And that's the one thing when we got interviewed recently on the BBC. That's the first. Where are you going to put these animals? But we've got to, and as I come back to you, I don't know whether they've got children or not, but they're the ones that are going to look at us and say we have the ability to do it. Yes, the habitat thing has got to go ahead as well, and hopefully that will be done, but we're concentrating about preserving these species before it's too late. But I agree, it's got to run alongside.
There's plenty of institutions that are actually regenerating also in the private sector, also businesses. So,
we have 30 seconds for your question.
30 seconds. Assunção Cristas from Portugal, Lisbon. I'm a law professor and a lawyer at VDA, a Portuguese-based law firm with offices in Africa. And I see a growing interest in biodiversity credits. One of the questions is also how to put the targets, how to guarantee that things happen. And I was wondering, what are your views on that? And if it might be a case for conservation and nature restoration, namely for the global south, and who will buy the credits? Because we need to find out the two ways. Thank you.
I might ask you to do 30 seconds, and then we should definitely take this.
That's a challenge. Okay. We are actually very into biodiversity credits since we got a grant from the EU to develop them. So they're going to be out about 2000, not develop the credits, but develop the platform to, develop then the credits. It's going to be out in 2026. And we are actually writing also a norm with ISO. It's actually, at the moment, it's published under public consultation. So maybe I can send you later the norm, and you can check it. Who's gonna buy it? Of course, companies in some cases, in order to leverage their impact on biodiversity. The very interesting thing about biodiversity credit compared to carbon credit to me is that it's written that you should compensate locally. So it's not going to be like the carbon market. According to us, it's going to be a completely new market, and maybe more transparent, since everything is going to be local and involving local communities. So there's a huge attention on that. So we hopefully going to develop a great market on that.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking Talis and Virginia for their time. Thanks very much.